everybody. Reb Risty here with Revolutionize Your Marketing, Your Business, Your Life. And I'm here with the Mr. David Oates, of course, who is going to have an amazing interview.
Oh, good. Okay, now I really can't screw it up.
Hey, this is what you do. You're crisis PR.
Right,
If you can't
exactly.
handle under pressure, who can?
we're in trouble.
Well, Dave, before we jump into everything, why don't you tell my audience really quickly who you are and what you do?
It's good to see you, Reb. Yeah, as for folks here watching and listening, I appreciate that. I'm a crisis PR guy, which means I'm the guy business owners, executives, nonprofit directors, board members will call when a matter comes, usually unforeseen, that draws the reputation of that entity in the question, whether that's because of press inquiries or somebody's taking a pot shot at you on a TikTok video, Instagram, LinkedIn, Yelp, Google, Glassdoor. It could be employee related, could be law, criminal law, civil law related, could be perceptions of poor customer service, all the points in betweens, from the what looks like a pretty benign start to pretty horrific, catastrophic events. I help organizations be able to communicate to a wide variety of audiences with the idea of getting them back to normal operations as quickly as they can, be able to at least stave off further erosion of their reputation, and then with the likes of myself and partners that I bring in, help them restore their reputation, get back to the brand value that they had achieved and deservedly need to restore and continue on their growth path.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And there's so many scenarios. I can imagine you have lots of good stories.
I got one or two. Yeah.
Yeah. I hope we can get to one of the two of those. You're obviously the person that nobody wants to have to call, but they want to know you for sure.
Right. Yeah.
So on the good side, let me start like best case scenario. How should a business, or how does a business prepare for the maybe inevitable? It's bound to happen sooner or later, right?
Yeah, great question, right? And great point. Yeah, every organization will find their reputation called into question at a crisis matter. And I'm not trying to be doomsday, but look, we all carry around these wonderful little devices, right? That has in and of itself a camera, a microphone, and with our social media accounts, a distribution system. And so that means everything from the local mom and pop shops to the regional tech startups to the established hospitality players to the mega companies can now find their reputation called into question, right? That wasn't the case 20 years ago. 25 years ago, you had to be a big enough company to get the ear or the eye of a newspaper or television station, radio news station, and the like. Well, now everybody's a broadcaster, which means every organization can find themselves in target and do. And even if it's not necessarily of their own doing, right? It could be misperceptions based on a bad day somebody's having. Yeah. Or maybe, in fact, you did mess up, and not with any malicious intent, right? We all have bad days. But now the people that you affect have this device that they channel this immediate anger, this frustration, this feeling of being voiceless, disenfranchisement, and they'll just spout it off without any warning and usually instantaneously. And that stuff gets picked up from that. So to your original question is when should organizations bring me in and can you prepare for it? The answer is absolutely. Because there are things that you have as inherent risks. You are in the people business. I don't care if you make a widget that you sell on Amazon, or you're a service business that is a local plumber, electrician, or you're a big law firm, right? You're going to deal with people. And those people will have off days. Those people will have perceptions about what they expected to receive and the reality of what they did receive. And when things start to rumble to the surface, you start getting emails inquiring about something. An employee starts griping about having to go back to work 3 or 4 days a week into the office instead of working remotely. Yeah. Having things like that. These are the things that should set off alarms in an executive and a manager's head to say, I need to get ahead of this. I need to start preparing for, if not actually actively communicating for something. Because if it starts to go viral it literally, as you know, Reb, it sparks just like that and can go into this big conflagration wildfire. And now everybody's daily routines are shot, right?
Yep.
Operations has got to halt because you've got to address things with your employees. Salespeople can't proactively go after new business because they're trying to protect the existing clients from running away. You've got investors starting to call, banks, your service provider, everybody involved with that will start asking, what's the deal? And if you're not prepared for that, it can be costly.
Yeah. Yeah. And as we know, people love to jump on that negative train. If they're saying positive things, that's great, but no one cares. They want to know about the bad stuff and just jump on that like nothing.
Yeah, I'm not a sociologist, right? But I think we've proven that as a society, we have reached our saturation point with the amount of information we receive, right? Mm-hmm. We're so fixated by these little mobile devices that we carry around. We're peppered with information on a constant basis, not even just a daily or hourly, constantly. And so we get overwhelmed really quickly. So the moment things don't look right, people get anxious, overwhelmed, and if left unchecked, it converts to anger, and you might be caught in the crosshairs. And again, maybe you did do something that was inadvertent, maybe it was without malice, but somebody's in a bad mood, and they will fire off like you are the second coming of Satan. And that's just how it is nowadays. And there's ways to respond. You just have to be ready to do so and do so quickly.
Yeah. So you've kind of brought up this bad mood. Do you have like a recent example of somebody just being in a bad mood that really created a PR crisis for a company?
Yeah. Yeah. So there was, I'm going to try to leave the names out of it because that's what I do. But there was a manufacturer who made this distilled spirits for a big warehouse retailer that we all know of, that we're, many of us are members of. And they had a situation where a small percentage of their product had to be recalled because the manufacturing process got a little off-centered. And so the flavor profile wasn't right. It wasn't toxic or a health concern, but it just didn't taste right. And they fixed the glitch, but didn't really tell anybody other than the retailer, right? Other than their retail partner. They didn't put anything proactive, things like that. And people started to buy the product because they couldn't take all of it off the shelves, and they fixed the manufacturing process. So there are a handful of people did that. And it started to develop chatter on Reddit and Instagram and all that. In fact, one Redditor likened the taste of this product to a urinal cake, which of course, yeah. Well, it begs the question: how do they know it tastes like a urinal cake? But we'll just put that aside.
Good point.
but what started to be a matter of 2 months ago that could have been resolved, within a couple of days by a proactive response. They just didn't say anything to anybody. And so now the social media chat is starting to rise. Now it required the retailer to put out a message. And they said, by the way, here's the manufacturer if you want to contact folks. Well, not only did customers contact them, but so did New York Post, CNN, TMZ, all of the national news outlets, because it's funny.
Yeah.
Big warehouse retailer recalls bad tasting, product. And it was about a week later before I get the call. And now we're playing catch up. Mm-hmm. Now we're talking to all of their retail partners, not just the big warehouse for that one, all of their other lines. Now we're talking to prospective customers. Now we're talking to investors. Now we're talking to their banks. Now we're talking to influencers. What could have been resolved in about 2 days, maybe a week at most, was a 6-month process.
Oh no!
And it cost them in the six figures to repair, which could have been solved. And I'm not talking. That's in addition to the product recall, right? The cost of those products that had to be recalled. That's just 6 figures, and all the other things they had to do: restructure contracts, additional manpower to stave off this mass exodus of other clientele that were wondering how is their product affected by this, which it wasn't, by the way. Yeah. So it's a prime example about how you think operationally you may have solved something, but if you haven't told anybody about this, the narrative will take off on its own. Because of a Redditor who apparently has some history with knowing what a urinal cake tastes like. That's the reality.
When you think about how do you know that? So is it as simple as they should have just got in front of it and owned that narrative? Because I'm assuming a lot of companies probably do this. Oh, we fixed the problem. Everything's okay.
Right. And it's kind of like the idea I use if people of a certain age listening to this podcast, remember the Brady Bunch episode where the kids were playing ball in the house and they smashed the vase, but they glued it all back together, but it wasn't exactly quite right. And this vase is sitting in front of the dining room table as the kids were eating. There's water in there for the plant that Mrs. Brady put together. And then in the middle of dinner, it starts leaking, right? But they're like, but we fixed it, no, you didn't, because somebody's going to see something. Somebody's going to hear something. So you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. It's always good to at least just let people know what happened, even if the probability of them being directly affected from it
Right.
is low. Because what happened was, again, in this case, it was a small number of the total bottles that they manufactured and they shipped. But it was enough to cause such concern and such questions in all of the consumers' minds and all the retail partners. It becomes a big, expensive mess that was unnecessary, right? So yeah, more often than not, you should get ahead of it, and or at least be prepared to do so. And that was a classic case about not being prepared and then having it just steamroll over you, and now you're picking up the pieces. Are they fine as a company? Oh yeah, they're fine. They make quality products.
They recovered.
I'd have no preconceived notion of doing that, but it just cost them so much more than necessary.
Right. And, obviously there's people like you that can help companies, but let's say you're a small organization. Like, how do I know what are some common things or simple things that I can do to protect myself?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things to do, right? One is you should take just a look in the course of your doing as to what are the inherent risks of your business, right? People, processes, products, right? That's the three things you want to look at.
Yep.
When I'm dealing with people, what are the things that could go wrong? How do I address those matters before they become big? And this isn't so much like a PR issue, right? This is just business. This is a business strategy issue, right? So what are the things going wrong there? What happens if my product doesn't get delivered on time? What happens if I can't build the products? What happens if something goes wrong in production? And this is the same for service businesses too. What happens if I can't deliver something on time? What happens if a process goes awry? What are the kinks in the process for that? And as you develop those risk management strategies that we all do, think about how you'll communicate, not just to an external public, right? This is where also I see companies go awry. Okay. They think about, well, what happens if the press gets involved, or what happens if I got to talk to customers? Yeah, those are important and they need to hear from you. But you better start with your staff. You better start with the people who are your best marketing resources, right? The people that go home every day and tell people whether they like their job or they don't like their job. Because if you leave them in the dark, when somebody asks them, boy, I saw this thing on Insta, or I saw this thing on LinkedIn, or I saw this thing in the press, what's going on? And their response is, I have no idea. No one is talking about me. It undercuts everything else you're supposed to do. So to your question, that's one thing that you should just do as a matter of course. But secondly, I think just as important, don't be the last person to know if somebody is talking about you online. There are free systems you can put in place, right? Google alerts. Anybody can set up for that one there. You put in keywords and quotes. You can set it up that as it happens, that when somebody writes about you in a blog or a review or something like that, you're going to get an alert from that. Good or bad, it'll just say, hey, somebody's mentioned you. And it's a good idea to take a look and see see what's going on. You do the same with any social media monitoring tools that have, and there are plenty of them that have freemium-based pricing. You can do some real basic stuff, not a lot of money. Right. But it just keeps tabs as to who's talking about you. Even if you don't get any business from the blogosphere, from social media, you're not driving anything to a website, that's still where your brand is being discussed. And you should know what people are saying so that if there is an issue, you'll be alerted to it. Because sometimes I get called in when it's days, weeks, months after somebody's been chattering about them. And the only time that the organization knows is when all of a sudden customers stop coming in. Because what happens is customers are looking at you online. Yeah. They're talking about you online. They're getting validation whether to buy something from other people online. And so I think that's also equally as important, is don't be the last person to know if somebody's talking about you online.
Absolutely. And social media, that's where my clients, or well, where we live for our clients. What, the
100%.
most common question is if they do have a negative review or somebody saying something on their social media, what do you recommend? Should they do it, respond privately right away? Like, what's the best course on social media to respond to something negative?
A great question. In online reviews, I absolutely believe they should respond and respond publicly. And I'll go into even situations that the organization's questioning whether this is a legitimate review. But in any type of review, you want to respond quickly, and you want to respond with two things. And this is true for really any audience, for any crisis. I don't care what organization you are, big, small, regional, local, national, global. If you have a crisis matter of reputation and you need to respond, you need to make sure that you respond with empathy and action. Now, by empathy, I'm not suggesting you have to admit culpability if there's none to be made, if somebody's just making an erroneous claim. But you need to diffuse the anger and that frustration, right? If you just respond with this sort of point counterpoint debate and you're tense about it from there, all you're going to do is raise that animosity. You're going to raise that level of anger, and it's just going to exacerbate this crisis that'll go on. So make sure you tell people, hey, thanks for commenting. I appreciate your point of view. I can tell you're upset about this one there, and going at what you're going to do to fix that. If you did do something wrong or inadvertently, or just, didn't put forth your best effort, as we all do on occasions, it's part of the fragility of the human species, own it. Own it right away and make amends, right? And if it's just a misunderstanding, say it's a misunderstanding and engage in dialogue for that. But let folks know that you care about that, because even if you're not going to change that reviewer, in the case, like if the Yelp reviewer gave you a 1-star and just went off on you.
Yeah.
Hey, that's fine. I don't expect you're going to change that reviewer's rating, but you're going to tell everybody else who's watching, seeing, reading that review that you care and that you're taking action. And they will be as impressed with the response that you gave as much as your products or service in general. Now, I said, contingencies for when you think that there's a review that's completely bogus. It might be a competitor or somebody who's just planting something on there. Still want to respond with empathy and action, but I always say it this way. Hey, you reply to it by saying, thanks so much for taking the time to review. We always appreciate it. We tell you're upset. By the way, we don't have a record of you being a customer. Would you contact us by this way, this area, email, phone number, so we can figure out when you bought and see if we can take care of it. Now, again, if it's a totally BS review from a fake account, they're not going to call you. You're not going to change that. But you're certainly let everybody else know that they probably shouldn't take this one at face value, right? There's probably more. There's probably something there. But I think not saying anything will give the false impression to everybody else that maybe you did something wrong, or even if you didn't, that you really don't care.
Yeah.
And those are not good positions for people to think you're in if they're thinking about buying from you or buying from you again.
Yeah.
You'll just delay the sales cycle at best. In worst cases, that they'll walk away and you'll leave money on the table.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. When I look at reviews, if you see that the business responded, it just gives you a feeling of at least they cared enough to try to fix the problem, whether it did or not. And I've actually seen our clients, if they do respond, they can actually get people to change a review or come back and say, hey, they fixed my problem, thank you, or whatever it is. So I'm always amazed. People are very receptive. They just want to be heard.
100% right. They just feel disenfranchised. And it's great what they do, but don't go in with the mindset that you will change the review. This is sort of just get a little zen, get acceptance, get a little confidently vulnerable, as I say, and just do what you need to do, and not worry about necessarily whether you're going to change their mind, because it really doesn't matter in many respects. It's great if it does. It's just an added feather in your cap. But really, you're telling everybody else that you care, and that's what's important.
I like it. Well, thank you, Dave, so much for coming on and sharing. I'm sure you've got some more good stories. We'll have to save those for next time.
I'll look forward to it.
Or after a happy hour. But maybe just one last. So our new question of the day has been, what's the best non-business advice that you've ever received? that you could share with our audience?
Yeah, the phrase is never live your life by default. I don't care if that's for personal goals or professional goals or whatever. If you question whether you're enough or not, you should question more than anything else about why not. Just try.
Mm-hmm.
We are in a position where, generally speaking, there's nothing from which we can recover, especially when we do things with great intent and grounding and adventure. The joy is in the journey. Never live your life by default. Things will work out the way they're supposed to, and it's okay. And sort of to that end, I'll leave it at this. Don't worry about the final score, right? I'm a sports fan, baseball and in particular. Don't worry about the box score, right? Don't worry about whether you got one hit out of five. Your hits will come if you just take a chance.
Yeah.
And that's a lesson I had to learn later in my life. And I'm grateful that I did get a chance to learn it, though.
Yeah. I love that. Don't you live your life by default, for sure. Well, thank you again so much. Really quickly for my audience, if they did want to get a hold of you, God forbid, because they have to, but if they do, what's the best way for them to learn more about you and get a hold of you?
Yeah. I'm like a bail bondsman, just make sure you have my contact information close by, but I hope you never have to use it. If you do, my website is publicrelationssecurity.com, publicrelationssecurity.com. But if you Google Dave Oates Crisis PR, my LinkedIn profile comes up, all the contact information. You can direct message me. My phone number's available in various places. By all means, even if you just want to have a 15 minutes or a consultation, there's a way to do so on my website. Free, no obligation. If you're dealing with a matter as part of your organization, I'm happy to have a conversation when our schedules line up. And Reb, thanks so much for your time. This has been great.
Yeah, of course. You're one of my favorite people. I love talking to you. So we'll have to do this again for sure.
I'll look forward to it.
All right. Thank you.